I met him on a rainy afternoon, the kind of rain that hides everything you see and makes the world feel suspended as if it's holding its breath just for you. Everyone warned me. My friends, my mother, even my coworkers whispered behind my back. They said he wasn't the kind of man a woman should trust with her heart, that his charm was a mask for something darker. But when he smiled at me, I believed in a life where warnings didn't exist, a life where the world could bend around my happiness, where love would protect me. That night, when he walked me home under the silver haze of streetlights and puddles reflected like tiny mirrors on the asphalt, I didn't hear the caution in their voices. I only felt the warmth of his hand brushing against mine, the ease of laughter spilling between us, the illusion of safety in his eyes. Months passed. I ignored the red flags as if turning a blind eye would make them disappear. The small lies, the moments of quiet anger he would never explain, the way he would disappear for hours and return with excuses that never satisfied my heart. Everyone continued to warn me. They said I was rushing. They said love was blind, but their words were meant to open my eyes, to let me see before it was too late. And yet I didn't listen. I didn't want to. I married him anyway. The ceremony was beautiful. Too beautiful, a fairy tale built on sand that no one saw sinking. The colors of the flowers, the laughter, the vows whispered so tenderly, all of it felt perfect in the moment. But perfection is a fragile thing, and I should have known that. Within months, the man I thought I knew became someone unrecognizable. The charm faded. The laughter became sharp words, cutting without care. Nights that were once filled with warmth and whispered dreams were replaced with cold silences and arguments that spiraled out of control. And when I called my mother, I whispered her name through tears, admitting that perhaps they were right all along. Perhaps the warnings weren't lies. They were truth wrapped in love for me that I had ignored. And yet even then, a part of me clung to the man I married, clung to the idea that love could change him, that devotion could mend the cracks I now saw so clearly. But life doesn't pause for hope. Life doesn't wait for belief. And the moment that broke the illusion came without warning, without mercy. One evening as I returned home from work, the silence inside the house was too thick to ignore. I called out, but only my echo answered. The doors were locked, the lights off, and his absence spoke louder than any confrontation could. And in that instant, the world I had built on dreams and charm collapsed. I should have listened. Every warning, every caution, every friend who shook her head in concern, they were right. And as I stood there, trembling and alone, the thought hit me like a sharp gust of wind. Not everyone leaves the way they promised to stay. Not every love protects. And sometimes, the very people we trust the most are the ones who disappear without a word. The days after he disappeared were the longest I had ever endured. The house, once alive with the hum of his presence, now felt like a tomb. Every object, his jacket draped over the chair, the coffee mug he always left on the counter, the empty side of the bed, reminded me of absence in a way that was unbearable. I called him over and over. I visited his friends, his office, the places he used to go, hoping for a clue, a sign, anything. But the answer never came. And as the weeks stretched into months, the whispers of my family grew louder, the warnings I had ignored replaying endlessly in my mind. My friends tried to console me, but words felt hollow. I couldn't tell if I was grieving him or the life I thought I would have with him, or perhaps both. There were nights I lay awake listening to the rain, wishing for him to walk through the door and explain everything, wishing for an apology I didn't even know I deserved. But the door never opened. Then came the messages. Short, cryptic, sometimes angry, sometimes apologetic. He was alive, but unreachable in ways that tore me apart. Every time I thought I understood his absence, another message came, each one reminding me that the life I had believed in was a lie. I had built my world around a man whose presence was conditional, whose love was fleeting, whose promises meant nothing. And yet, despite the fear, despite the humiliation, despite the cold reality of his betrayal, a small, stubborn part of me refused to let go. I couldn't stop thinking about the day we married, about the vows we whispered, about the laughter that had once seemed real. I clung to that illusion even as reality stripped it away piece by piece. One afternoon, nearly 6 months after he vanished, I received a message that froze me entirely. Just 3 words, "I'm coming home." My heart raced with a mix of dread and hope. My hands shook as I read and reread the text, my mind imagining every possible scenario. Did he truly intend to return? Or was this another manipulation, another test, another cruel twist of the life I had entrusted to him? I didn't know. I couldn't know. The hours dragged, each second stretching into eternity, and every shadow in the house seemed to whisper, warning me that the man I married might no longer exist, replaced by someone I would never recognize. And when the knock finally came at the door, light and hurried, I froze. My heart beat faster than my mind could catch up. I should have prepared for anything, but nothing could have prepared me for the sight of him standing there. Not the man I had married, not the man I loved, but someone whose eyes carried secrets I could never guess, whose smile felt hollow, and whose presence promised revelations I wasn't ready to face. I wanted to step back, to retreat into safety, but something deeper than fear rooted me in place. And then he spoke, his voice low, deliberate, a warning in itself. "We need to talk. Tonight. Alone." That simple sentence carried weight I couldn't ignore. And as I closed the door behind him, a shiver ran through me. I knew in that instant that nothing would ever be the same again. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that the truths waiting for me that night would be far darker, far more painful, and far more impossible to escape than even my worst nightmares had imagined. That night, as I watched him sit across from me at the kitchen table, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, I realized I barely recognized him. The man I had married, the one I thought I knew so well, had been replaced by someone colder, sharper, someone who measured his words like a knife and knew exactly how to wield them. His eyes, once warm and familiar, now carried shadows of secrets I couldn't even begin to guess. I tried to speak first, to find an opening, to reclaim even a fragment of the trust we once had. But before I could, he leaned back in his chair and said something that made my stomach drop. "You never really knew me, did you?" The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as if the weight of all the months of absence and silence had been compressed into those 6 simple words. I wanted to scream, to demand explanations, to lash out at him for the torment of uncertainty, for the sleepless nights, for the constant ache of not knowing where he had been, who he had been with, and why he left me to unravel alone. But my voice failed me. All I could do was stare, trying to read his expression for a clue, any sign that the man I loved still existed somewhere beneath the mask he now wore. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't comforting. It was almost predatory, a reminder that control had shifted in ways I had never anticipated. "Do you remember the day we first met?" he asked, leaning forward. My heart pounded as I nodded, unsure if recalling that memory would calm him or give him more leverage. "Everything I did since then, every choice, every step, every promise you believed in, it was never what it seemed," he continued, his words slow and deliberate, each one a hammer striking against the fragile walls of my heart. I shook my head, fighting the nausea rising in my chest. The man I loved, the life I had imagined, the hope I had clung to, it was all unraveling before me. Then he said something that cut deeper than any absence or betrayal ever could. "I had to disappear. You'll understand why soon. But not yet. Not until they are ready." My throat tightened, my mind spinning. Who was they? Who else was involved in this secret life he had led? Why had he chosen me to bear the weight of uncertainty, the pain, the loneliness, while he carried on hidden from me? And most importantly, was he ever truly coming back, or was this another cruel illusion, another game to test my endurance, my patience, my loyalty? The night stretched endlessly, every second a mirror reflecting my fear, my anger, my desperate desire for answers I could not yet grasp. I felt the walls of the kitchen close in, suffocating me with the enormity of the unknown. And then, just as I thought I could endure no more, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, wrapped carefully, almost reverently. My breath caught. I didn't want to see it. I wanted to look away, to close the door on this nightmare, to deny reality. But something, a mix of dread and curiosity, forced my eyes to meet his. And when he placed the package on the table, his gaze unwavering, I understood immediately that this was more than an object. This was a message. A key. A revelation. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about him, about us, about the life I had built on illusions. And as I reached for it, my hands trembling, my mind racing with questions I couldn't yet answer, he whispered just above a breath, "Open it, and decide what kind of life you want to face from this moment on." My fingers shook as I untied the ribbon. The paper inside bore a name I never expected, a place I never imagined, and a truth I had never suspected. And in that instant I realized that the story I thought I was living was only the beginning. The package lay on the table between us like a silent judge, demanding my attention, forcing my trembling hands to confront truths I wasn't sure I was ready for. I unfolded the paper carefully, as though it were a fragile piece of glass that could cut both my fingers and my heart at the same time. Inside was an address, scribbled in handwriting I didn't recognize, and beneath it a note that made the room spin around me. Everything you believe is a lie. Come tonight alone. You need to see the truth. My stomach sank. Alone. He wanted me alone. Was this a trap? Or was it the key to understanding the months of silence, the months of anxiety, the months of unanswered questions? The house felt suddenly smaller, the walls pressing in on me with the weight of every choice I had ever made. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but my mind was already made. I had to know. I had to see. I had to confront the reality of the man I had married, the secrets he had kept, and the life I thought I had chosen. That evening I dressed carefully, each movement measured, each decision deliberate. My heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. I left Mia sleeping safely in her room, my love for her warring with the need to uncover the truth. The drive to the address felt like an eternity. Every red light, every passing car, every shadow along the roadside seemed to whisper warnings I couldn't heed. And then I arrived. A modest house, dimly lit, almost invisible among the other buildings, as if hiding from the world, just as he had hidden from me. My hands shook as I raised my hand to knock, and when the door opened I was stunned. Not by him, but by the sight of someone I had never expected. A woman. Tall, elegant, with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through my soul. And she smiled, not warmly but knowingly, as if she had been waiting for me for a very long time. "You're here," she said simply. Her voice was calm, almost serene, but there was something in it that made my pulse quicken. "Yes," I whispered. "I had to come. I need to know." She stepped aside, allowing me in, and I felt the chill of a room that had secrets buried in its corners, secrets that would not remain hidden for long. Then he appeared from a shadowed doorway, his expression unreadable. No warmth. No apology. Just the same cold eyes that had haunted my dreams for months. "You came," he said. "Good. You need to see this for yourself." And then she handed me a folder, thick and heavy, filled with papers, photographs, and documents that threatened to shatter everything I had believed about him. I looked down at the folder, my hands trembling, and realized that what I was about to uncover would change not just my understanding of him, but of myself, my life, and the very choices I had made in the name of love. My heart pounded as I opened the first page, and with each revelation, each lie exposed, each truth revealed, each betrayal documented, I felt a mixture of rage, grief, and disbelief coursing through me. Months of absence, deception, and manipulation began to form a pattern, a story I hadn't seen until now. And as I turned the final page, my breath caught in my throat. The last photograph inside was not of him, nor of the woman, nor of anyone I expected. It was of Mia, my daughter, standing in a place I had never taken her, with someone I didn't recognize. And scribbled in the corner, in the same handwriting as the note, "She is at the center of this. Never forget that." My hands shook violently, my vision blurred with tears, and the room seemed to spin. The truth I had sought was here, but it was heavier, darker, and more impossible than I could have imagined. And in that moment, I understood that nothing would ever be simple again. Nothing would ever be safe again. And as I looked up at him, my husband, the man I had married, the man I had loved blindly, I realized that the real story, the part one hadn't been told, the part that would determine everything, was about to begin. The weight of the folder in my hands felt like it was pressing me into the floor, like every secret, every lie, every betrayal had been meticulously packed into those pages, just waiting for me to collapse under its force. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. My mind raced, trying to process the images, the documents, the photographs of moments I had no memory of, moments in which my trust, my family, and even my daughter had been pawns in a game I didn't understand. He stood across the room, watching me with a quiet intensity that made my stomach twist. He said nothing at first, letting me absorb, letting me hurt, letting the realization settle in that everything I had believed about him, about us, about my life, was a carefully constructed illusion. Then he spoke, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made me shiver. "Do you understand now why I had to disappear?" I wanted to scream, to throw the folder at him, to demand answers that I feared I would regret hearing. But my voice failed me, trapped in the shock and horror of the truths before me. My hands shook as I picked up a photograph. Mia, smiling at a birthday I didn't know existed, held by a man whose presence had been invisible to me until this moment. I wanted to tear the photograph in half, to deny reality, to pretend none of this was happening. But denial was no longer an option. The woman, the one who had first handed me the folder, stepped forward and said something that sent a chill through me. "Everything he's done, it's been for a reason. And it's time you understand your role in it." My heart pounded. My role? Me? What could I possibly have to do with this labyrinth of secrets and manipulation? He finally moved closer, and for the first time, I noticed the exhaustion behind his eyes, the shadows of sleepless nights, the tension of a man carrying burdens I had never suspected. "You think I left you alone," he said softly, "but I never truly left. Every choice I made, every step I took was tied to protecting something you couldn't see. Something you weren't ready for." I wanted to believe him, to cling to the fragment of hope that maybe love, even twisted and hidden, still existed between us. But the images, the papers, the proof of betrayals piled high in that folder screamed otherwise. And then, without warning, he pulled another envelope from his coat pocket. My hands froze. It was addressed to me. My name, written in the same familiar handwriting that had haunted me for months. "Open it," he said. My fingers trembled as I carefully tore the seal. Inside were letters, each one chronicling choices, decisions, and sacrifices that involved me in ways I could not comprehend. And then came the final note, the one that made my chest constrict so tightly I feared I would collapse. "Tonight will change everything. Trust no one but yourself." I looked up at him, searching his face for a hint, a clue, a reassurance. But there was nothing, only the calm certainty of a man who knew more than he let me see, who held the power, the secrets, and the answers. And in that instant I realized I was no longer a passive participant in this story. I was a key player in a web of events far larger and far darker than I had ever imagined. My heart raced. My mind spun. And just as I thought I could take a moment to collect myself, I heard the sound of a car outside, pulling up slowly, deliberately, its engine low and ominous. My pulse skyrocketed. I hadn't expected anyone else. I hadn't anticipated this. And then the front door opened and a figure stepped inside, carrying an aura of danger I could feel in my bones. I knew immediately that the night was far from over, and the revelations waiting for me were about to get far more personal, far more dangerous, and far more impossible to escape than anything I had endured so far. The figure that entered the room moved with quiet confidence, their presence immediately commanding the space in a way that made my chest tighten. I could feel the tension pressing down on me, thick and suffocating, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of what was about to unfold. My husband remained still, his expression unreadable, as though he had known this moment would come all along and had prepared for it in ways I could not comprehend. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, to confront him, but the fear crawling up my spine silenced me. The figure stepped closer, and in the dim light, I could finally see who it was. A woman, tall, poised, eyes sharp and calculating, carrying the kind of quiet authority that left no room for defiance. My heart pounded. Something about her presence made the house feel smaller, the shadows deeper, and my own powerlessness more pronounced. She laid a hand on the folder that still rested on the table, her fingers brushing mine lightly, and in that moment, I realized she wasn't just a visitor. She was part of the story, part of the life I thought I had lived, part of the deception I had unknowingly stepped into. "You've seen some of it," she said softly, but the words carried weight far heavier than their tone suggested. "But there is more. And it involves all of you, your choices, your decisions, even your daughter." My stomach twisted. Mia. How could my little girl possibly be entangled in this web? I felt a surge of protectiveness, the kind that made your hands shake and your teeth clench, but at the same time, a creeping dread settled in my chest. My husband's voice broke through the tension. "It's time you understood everything. Not tomorrow, not later, not when it's convenient. Tonight, here, now." His words were calm, almost measured, but I could hear the undercurrent of urgency, of danger, of secrets that had been carefully hidden until this precise moment. I wanted to leave, to escape, to run into the night and never look back, but the weight of responsibility held me firmly in place. I owed it to Mia. I owed it to myself, and so I stayed. The woman handed me a second envelope, heavier this time, filled with photographs, documents, and letters that painted a picture so disturbing, so intricate that I could barely process it. Faces I recognized, places I thought were safe, decisions I believed were innocent. All intertwined in ways that made my heart race and my mind spin. And just as I began to turn the first page, the sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Each step a warning, each echo a pulse of fear. I froze, the pages trembling in my hands. My husband's eyes narrowed. The woman's expression remained unreadable. And then the door opened, revealing another figure, silhouetted against the dim light outside. Someone I had never expected. Someone whose arrival would change the course of the night, the story, and everything I thought I understood about trust, betrayal, and survival. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to run, to scream, to deny what I was seeing. But there was nowhere to hide. And as the door clicked shut behind them, I realized with a sinking certainty that the revelations, the manipulations, the danger, and the heartbreak were only beginning. Tonight nothing would be the same. Tonight I would learn the full truth about the man I had married, the life I thought I controlled, and the web of secrets that had silently woven itself around me and my daughter. And just as the room grew still, the shadows heavy and ominous, I understood that by the end of this night, my life would either be broken beyond repair, or changed in ways I could never imagine. The room felt impossibly small, heavy with secrets, fear, and anticipation, every heartbeat echoing like a drum in my chest. The figures surrounding me, the man I had married, the woman who had appeared that night, and the last stranger whose presence I still couldn't understand, watched me with silent intensity. My hands trembled as I held the second envelope, still unopened, knowing that inside lay answers I both craved and feared. Every step I had taken, every choice I had made had led me to this moment. And now, as I looked around the dimly lit room, I understood the terrifying truth. I had been a player in a game far bigger than myself, a life entangled in lies I could never have imagined. I opened the envelope, my fingers shaking violently, and the pages spilled out, each one a revelation that shredded the illusions I had clung to for months. Photographs of meetings I had never known about, documents revealing betrayals so intricate and calculated that my head spun, and letters written in voices that were mine and yet weren't, as though history itself had been rewritten without my consent. And then I saw it. A photograph of Mia, my daughter, smiling at a birthday I didn't attend, held by someone I had never met, a figure whose presence made my stomach churn. Scribbled in the corner, a single sentence: "She is the key. Protect her or everything is lost." My pulse accelerated, every nerve in my body screaming with urgency and fear. I turned to him, my husband, demanding explanations with eyes that burned through him. But his calm expression never wavered. "You've seen part of it," he said softly, almost regretfully, "but not everything. The truth is heavier than you can imagine. And the decisions you make tonight will determine everything for you and your daughter." I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand he tell me everything now. But the woman beside him placed a hand on my shoulder, steadying me with a weight I didn't understand. "It's not just about him," she said quietly. "It's about you. Your choices. Your courage. Your strength." I felt tears prick my eyes. Courage. Strength. Words I had forgotten I possessed, buried beneath months of fear, uncertainty, and betrayal. But as I glanced at Mia's photograph, a determination I hadn't realized I had surged within me. I would protect her. I would face whatever secrets, whatever dangers, whatever lies waited for me. And then, without warning, the last figure stepped forward, their face finally visible in the dim light. My breath caught. Recognition hit me like a physical blow. Someone I never expected. Someone whose presence changed everything I thought I knew about my husband, about the family I had married into, about the choices that had brought me here. And in that instant, every warning I had ever ignored, every voice that had cautioned me, every doubt that had nagged at the back of my mind, rushed back with a fury I couldn't contain. Everyone had told me not to marry him. Everyone had warned me. And now, standing in a room charged with truth, danger, and revelation, I finally understood why. The man I loved, the life I imagined, the illusions I clung to, all of it had been a carefully orchestrated maze, and I had been running blind. My heart raced as the room held its breath with me. My daughter, my life, the consequences of trust and love, everything balanced on a knife's edge. And just as I was about to speak, to demand, to claim a fragment of control, the stranger spoke, their voice low and deliberate. "You don't know everything yet. And if you think you're ready for the truth, you aren't." My stomach dropped. My mind spun. I realized in that moment that the night was far from over, that the story I thought I had lived was only the beginning, and that every choice I had made, every step I would take next, would determine the fate of everything I held dear. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling, and I knew one thing with certainty. Nothing would ever be the same again. And the revelation that would change my life forever was only one heartbeat away. Please follow me for no reason.